waiting with anticipation to release the audit outcomes of 2014-2015, as it marks the end of the administration that the current leadership of local government has assumed since 2011. Hence, today, it is our pleasure to share with you our analysis of the audit results for the management of finances in the whole of local government, covering all 9 provinces in the country and giving a sense of what the overall picture looks like when we compare different municipalities to others. Before I get to the detail of what's contained in our official statement that accompanies these results, it is worth noting that in our general report that we have issued this morning, we've got an elaborate set of data that will assist those that will be writing henceforth to interpret and understand what we are trying to communicate through this report. And I will also like to invite you to have a look at that report, which contains additional other specific information which we are not going to be able to cover here because of the summarized version of these consolidated outcomes. Let me start by saying what we have in 2014-2015 is going to be compared with what we had in 2010-2011 when the current administration of local government took office. And we are pleased to report that these audit outcomes have shown an encouraging 5-year improvement. We have seen this improvement in the area of financially unqualified opinions with no findings, which are those that we commonly refer to as clean audits. At the beginning in 2010-2011, we were sitting with only about 13 municipalities across the country that were described as those whose financial information, financial reporting, and status of administrative and financial controls was found to be credible. Where we are today in 2014-2015, as far as municipalities are concerned, that number has grown to 54. In addition to that 54, which is classically the municipalities themselves, there's an additional 18 municipal entities. The like of Johannesburg Water will fall under municipal entities. The likes of Pick It Up will fall under municipal entities. So there's an additional 18 of those that have also been clean in the last year that we are auditing, taking the total number of municipalities and entities that have achieved unqualified opinions with no findings to a total of 72. We are indeed pleased to say that this has come off a very low base if we look at where we were when we were only about 5% of the municipalities 5 years ago. So we want to say well done to these municipalities that you will find in Annexure 1 of this report, annotated on the first line by a green bar, which indicates all of those by name, as well as which province they come from, is contained in Annexure 1 of the general report in front of us. It is also worth noting, as we are reporting on this general report, that the level of regressions during this period has also been quite low. When I say regressions, I mean that only 13% of the total number of municipalities have gone backwards over this past 5 years, while 34% of them have almost recorded the same audit outcomes they had 5 years ago. And I think another important aspect to note in these outcomes is that the level of adverse and disclaimed opinions, and these ones are those where the auditors are not in a position to express an opinion because there is limited information to do so. We are pleased to report that these have decreased from way in excess of 30% of the total some 5 years ago to about 11% of municipalities in the current year. And if you are looking at the slide on the board, it clearly indicates what I've just said in terms of the journey that has been traversed by many of these municipalities, who many of them were described 5 years ago as those that do not show any hope of making a forward progress, whereas if you look at 2014-2015, that red bar is all but going in the right direction. We would like to recognize the considerable effort that has been put into this effort by South African Local Government Association, the National Treasury, as well as the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in addressing the root causes of the disclaimers. And I'm sure the media will, when they go back to their notes, recognize the fact that SALGA, some time ago during the journey towards the process of achieving clean audits, they took a decision to address what was called the municipalities in the red zone. Those municipalities in the red zone were the ones that were stuck at consistently reporting bad audit outcomes, which reflected the fact that there was lack of transparency in financial management within those municipalities. We are pleased to say that that is slowly becoming a thing of the past. We have also shared with yourselves some of the attributable reasons to this positive achievement of audit outcomes, both the achievement of clean as well as the disappearance of the ones that were disclaimed and adverse in the last 5 years. On the page here, in this media analysis on page 2, we set out some of the principal efforts that we had encouraged leadership to embrace in order for them to see some level of improvement in audit outcomes. We have highlighted the 5, being the involvement of the leadership of the municipalities in filling vacancies with people that possess minimum competencies, among others, and have also made an effort to stabilize the administration by lowering the level of turnover in key positions. Another key attribute which we have identified among a lot of these municipalities that have achieved these good outcomes has been the courage demonstrated by leadership to deal with transgressions as well as manage poor performance through the in-year monitoring processes within these municipalities. The leadership also helped in supporting the improvement of clean audit by promoting the Operation Clean Audit as well as the Back to Basics program, although we have not yet seen the bulk of the outcomes, but we believe that what has been started through COGTA via the Back to Basics is likely to trigger good outcomes if it's consistently performed. The municipal managers and senior managers in most of these municipalities that have improved these outcomes have also paid attention to addressing audit action plans as well as the regular improvement in financial management disciplines. We would also like to congratulate the governance structures, particularly councils and certain municipal public accounts committees, who have ensured that nothing escapes their attention when it comes to financial management and reporting. Overall, as we are reporting on these outcomes, we would also like, as we do on page 3 of this statement, draw attention to the fact that the total expenditure that was incurred in local government of all these 272 municipalities that we are auditing on, they had a combined total expenditure budget of about 347 billion compared to last year's number that we reported on, which was about 315 billion. So these municipalities that spent all of this 347 billion, we are also analyzing them in this report with regards to what component of which municipalities got what type of audit opinion. So under that heading, we are reporting that of the 347 billion spent across all of them, the ones that achieved clean audits represented a total expenditure of 134 billion, which translates to 39% of the total spend. While those that have unqualified opinions with findings represent another 143 billion, which is an equivalent of 41%. And as we can see, the adverse and the disclaimers having receded over time represent a mere 6% of the total that has been spent through them. I think it is safe to say that we are not just looking at the number of municipalities, but we are also addressing what amount of expenditure did they represent in relation to these outcomes. Further on, we've also taken a dive into showing these outcomes as they relate to each of the provinces, because each one of the provinces has under its fold all of these municipalities spread across the 9 provinces. And this is the picture that sets out how between 2010 and 2011 each of the 9 provinces contributed towards the achievement either of unqualified with no findings, or qualified with findings, or municipalities that were qualified, or those that are in the red. And I think that if the eye is able to help us here, you can see that if you look in the column that say 10, 11, there's a dominance even in double digits in some of these municipalities of municipalities that were disclaimed in terms of the red. But as you cast your eye towards the right, you're starting to see an emergence of large numbers of green municipalities, as well as those that are unqualified with findings. This is what we mean when we say some of these municipalities have made good progress. We've categorized a lot of these municipalities because of similar characteristics that they carry in respect of the financial disciplines that they embrace. And you will see in our report, we say the combination of the Western Cape, Gauteng, and KwaZulu-Natal province represent those 3 provinces that have the largest number of clean audits. And the Western Cape, as you can see, leading them. We also want to take note of the fact that while we pay attention to each of these provinces, we also want not to forget the fact that there are still some significant weaknesses in certain areas within these provinces. Notably, in the Western Cape, if one looks at the Central Karoo region, you will find a picture in the Central Karoo that demonstrates that some significant amount of work still needs to be done in that region. And if one casts an eye over Gauteng, by the same token, one can see that the West Rand region in Gauteng is largely one of those regions that are struggling with municipalities' ability to manage their finances, transparency, and with due care. And also in KwaZulu-Natal, Umkhanyakude district municipality remains one of those, not the only, but one of those within that province that has pulled down the overall results for the entire province. And the same goes for the Eastern Cape, Free State, and Mpumalanga. We classify them as these provinces where municipalities are starting to emerge from many years of negative audit outcomes. And what we are seeing in 2014, 2015 is some level of stability emerging also within these 3 provinces. Notably, within the Eastern Cape, the Joe Kabi district municipality continues to provide the right level of performance when it comes to the individual municipalities within its fold. We have also noted in the Free State that Thabo Mofusanyana district has in fact become the first clean audit in that province of the Free State. So we would like to congratulate them for having done this, as well as having stuck to their commitment to deliver the good outcomes when we visited them last year. And I think it is also worth noting that in the Free State, the Majabeng local municipality has also been identified and concurred by the leadership of the province that it is one of those troubled spots when it comes to the disciplines of financial management and other matters of governance. And lastly, we want to also say that as far as the Mpumalanga province is concerned, much as they may be making steady progress, if the leadership in that province takes eye off the ball and not intervene decisively across the municipality, audit outcomes. And the last category of 3 provinces I would like to mention are the ones that we as an audit office have classified as providing disappointing performance. And those provinces, those municipalities are largely in the Northwest, in Limpopo, and the Northern Cape. If one looks at the Northern Cape specifically, we have seen that there have been some improvements in recent times. However, there is still a high percentage of disclaimed audits, even in this region. The Northwest, as one can see, there's still a dominance of very negative audit outcomes in this province, and largely in Limpopo, we are also witnessing a stagnation or little improvement to speak of. So that's the synopsis, and the detail with regards to each of the municipalities in these provinces will be contained in our general report. Ours was just to highlight some of those areas that will require more closer attention, as well as to recognize those that have consistently performed over the time. As I speak, in terms of what is an Annexure A and Annexure 2 of our report, we have detailed by name each one of these municipalities, and you will see in the annotation of those indices in Annexure 1 and Annexure 2. If you want to examine any one of the municipalities as to its status over 5 years, you'll find that in Annexure 2. If you wanted to examine them in relation to how they've performed from this year to last year, that will be contained in Annexure 1. And all of those annexures will have an indication as to what are the things that caused audit failure and what is our assessment of the status of accounting and managerial controls. So that is the overall status with regards to these outcomes. And as we always do in an audit, we do not only just stop at signing the financial statements for purposes of giving an opinion on whether they present fairly the financial statements. We also assess whether the areas of compliance, particularly in the areas where financial risk is dominant, we also assess whether performance has been good at that level. And as I do that, it is worth reporting back once more that when it comes to the area of financial statements, which is about bringing forth your financial statements for scrutiny at the end of August for all municipalities, we have seen an improvement in that area, which is a clear indication that we are starting to get closer to getting all these municipalities to report in time. Whether or not their financial statements will be acceptable to the audit is a different matter, but the most important thing is if they come forward and present themselves for scrutiny, it's a good indication that all of them are prepared to be checked and to be reported on. So the financial statement submission level has improved, and we would like to also draw attention to the fact that while they were making these improvements in financial statements, they've also had to pay a significant amount of money towards the services of consultants. So the consulting services towards buying financial reporting solutions from external service providers has also increased. We do say that it is expected because there are many demands on the capacity of financial management staff in municipalities. This is a welcome area of support. However, in our report, we are emphasizing the point for municipalities and councils to take diligent steps to control this growth of expenditure towards consultants, because it is sometimes growing disproportionate to the amounts available for providing services elsewhere in certain municipalities. We cannot spend these amounts of money, which at the end of the 14-15 year have amounted to 892 million, while some of those that are taking advantage of these services do not show any forward improvement in their outcomes. And that's why we want to emphasize the quality of this expenditure so that we can increase the level of oversight towards the spend that municipalities make towards financial management support services. There's a space for it, but not to the extent that we are observing now. Another area which we would like to draw attention to is that when it comes to the performance reports that are supposed to be produced for purposes of reporting on the annual reports, on page 6, we have seen a good improvement over time, particularly when it comes to the usefulness of the information that's presented. We are still tracking certain troublesome spots when it comes to the reliability of the information being reported. So there are two aspects when it comes to the performance reports: good improvement on the usefulness of the information because it is relevant. However, we are struggling to agree in a number of instances with regards to the reliability of that information because of weaknesses in internal controls. We want this matter to be flagged as well, because when all else is done, what is important is what have you done with the money. And if the information that is supposed to demonstrate what was done with the money is not credible, it might give problems when it comes to explaining delivery of services or otherwise. The next matter that we've canvassed in our report for this year is the area of the compliance with relevant legislation. This has been an area where, unfortunately, there has been the lowest improvement. This is the area where, when it comes to compliance with key legislation, where the likes of supply chain deviations are dominant, where non-compliance with certain financial management prescripts is not observed. And we think that because this area is low, it creates a fertile environment for irregular expenditure to grow. And as this report shows, where there are a number of supply chain management deviations, it also comes with increasing levels of irregular expenditure. As we speak today, in terms of the report for all of the 9 provinces combined and all of the 272 municipalities, we are recording and reporting a total amount of 14.75 billion with regards to this irregular expenditure. This irregular expenditure, to give more context and substance to it, is those instances where the prescribed rules that govern the procurement of goods and services, among others, are not always observed. And for the audit, the minimum that we are required to do is to identify those instances, engage with those matters with management of the entity, and report on them if we are not getting satisfactory responses. That's what we've done. We've quantified it to the extent of 14.75 billion. What it means is that those people who are charged with oversight within the institution are required to do the next step. And the next step is for them to investigate what are the underlying reasons that give rise to non-compliance with supply chain, which ultimately ends with irregular expenditure. So it is that type of expenditure. And again, if anybody is wanting to commit undesirable financial management practices, they can do it well in this environment for as long as the controls are not being tightened. That's the part with regards to irregular expenditure. It's potentially what may have been received. And in this instance, we have extended our tests in the office to say, if there was this prevalence of irregular expenditure to the extent of 14.75 billion, how much of that total has been received in the form of goods and services? Through the audits, we have been able to satisfy ourselves that to the extent of 10 billion of that 14.75, we were able to trace the fact that even though procedures pertaining to supply chain management were not completely observed, but those goods and services that were bought were received to the extent of 10 billion rands, we have satisfied ourselves. So I think it is important for us to walk away here knowing that much as we are uncertain as to the reasons that gave rise to the non-compliance with the supply chain rules, but from an audit point of view, we have satisfied ourselves that that 14.75 billion is not all completely lost, because, as I say, to the extent of 10 of it has been traced to goods and services that were received. The levels of concentration of this irregular expenditure, once more, is largely in areas like the Northwest, in Mpumalanga, in the Eastern Cape, and in Limpopo. These are, among others, provinces that have contributed a significant portion of this irregular expenditure. Going down to another area of undesirable expenditure which we are required to report on is the area of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. In short, this is expenditure incurred in vain. It arises in situations where a person in a finance department is required to make a regular payment to a particular supplier, and if there are penalty and other clauses in that particular agreement and that deadline has not been complied with, it will result in a payment to that particular service provider, which will be a payment without receiving any benefit for it. And that's why we are saying it is fruitless and wasteful. It's also things like interest paid on debts that are due, which were supposed to be paid by a particular due date, but because they were not, they also attract an additional cost in the form of interest. As well as the area of the last third category of these undesirable areas of expenditure is unauthorized expenditure. And unauthorized expenditure points to lack of managing budgets according to what has been appropriated for each of the functions within a municipality, to the extent that more money gets committed to what has already been allocated in the budget. you will find in these instances that it's not all situations that are about cash. There are instances that have to do with non-cash items. If, for example, a municipality did not anticipate that there's going to be a deterioration in the ability to collect monies owing by consumers, it will be required at the end of the year to impair that debt. When you impair that debt, you put a charge into your books to the extent of the amount you think you are not going to collect, and if you didn't budget for it or think about it at the time of the budget, it then falls foul of the unauthorized expenditure. These are items that we are reporting on to reflect on the inefficiencies that are still prevalent in the management of finances. The other area that we also have tested and assessed is the whole area of the financial health of the municipalities. The question is, when all is said and done and all these internal control weaknesses have been identified and corrected, does the municipality still have money to do the things that it ought to do with regards to the delivery of services? And our overall assessment is that many of them are starting to incur net deficits, meaning that the total amount of resources available for them to spend are starting to be exceeded by the amounts of money that they are committed to in the form of expenditures. Hence, they end up with a net deficit instead of a net surplus. That's a high-risk area which needs to be looked at, particularly in a tight fiscal environment like we are operating in. We are also seeing signs of certain of the current liabilities within municipalities starting to exceed the current assets, which indicates that to be in a net current liability position, those assets that are supposed to be available for the continuation of the delivery of services are starting to disappear over time. And also the area of the management of cash. A lot of municipalities that we have analyzed in this report are taking too long to collect the debt that comes on the back of the services that have already been consumed. However, when they have to make their payments to their suppliers, they are normally pushed to pay much earlier or to pay quicker, which means that the bulk of the cash that is supposed to be made available for use in the municipality is largely, for a long period of time, sitting in somebody else's pocket, which is raising issues of the liquidity of the municipality. Does the municipality always have sufficient cash resources to meet its obligations as and when they arise? And so we want to flag this matter to say that there is a high risk of uncertainty with regards to a number of these municipalities' ability to continue in the foreseeable future, because they are now starting to face a tight financial situation, but that's also compounded largely by the weaknesses in their internal control environment. And the other point which we also flagged in this report, we've also looked at how the grants, as we appreciate the money that is used in municipalities, some of it is collected through the rates and all of that, but part of it is also allocated from the Central Revenue Fund. And of course, our reflection in terms of this report is to say that a lot of this expenditure that is received on the back of the likes of your municipal infrastructure grant, on the back of your municipal systems improvement grant, is all being allocated for expenditure. However, there is still a significant weakness when it comes to assessing the performance of these projects against targets. So we want to draw attention to this matter to say that let there be a requisite level of control that is put into ensuring that the performance and the targets against which these grants are given is also followed through and reported on. Because if it is not, and the monies are spent, it is possible, as we have seen in some of these municipalities, that what was intended in respect of the grant gets diverted towards other things that were not initially what the purpose of the grant funding was. And as I get closer to the end of my briefing, we've also taken note of some of the key attributes that are necessary for municipalities to make further improvements. And we think these, from page 8 to page 9, will be an important input that needs to go into the work plans of the new councils that will take office come post-August 3 period. And ourselves as an audit office, as always, are committing to work closely with those councillors when they take office in the second part of this year to make sure that the stuff that has been achieved, as well as the challenges that have already been identified, do not go back to zero when new people take office, but there is a proper handover process that between ourselves and the respective levels of oversight in Parliament and within the institutions are going to be seized with to ensure that this continuous journey that has culminated in these outcomes in 2014-15 is not allowed to regress. Because as we were analyzing the 5-year period, we saw that in the 2010-2011 period, there was a little bit of a dip because of those changeovers and long vacancies that arise, among others. And we hope that with these audit outcomes, there will probably be a safer transitional process. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, AG. We will now take responses from Parliament, COGTA, and then SALGA. I will change. We'll start with the Minister. You'll be fine. What about the mics?
Thank you very much. Let me take this opportunity, firstly, by commending Tate Makwetu and his team for the excellent work that they've been doing as part of their mandate to ensure that our development agenda as a country is taken forward. And then I must indicate on behalf of COGTA that we welcome the AG's report on the audit of municipal finances for the financial year 2014-2015. The AG's report shows that the department, as well as other sector departments and role players like SALGA, interventions over the past few years. These range from Operation Clean Audit to the current intervention, which is a consolidation of all previous interventions called the Back to Basic program, are starting to bear fruits and are starting to bear positive results. I must indicate that this is a consequence of a very collaborative and protracted process. Those of you who have been following the local government sector, you'll remember at some stage there was a strong sentiment that the AG's role is only finding mistakes in municipalities. But over years, that particular sentiment has changed, and we have seen the AG's office that is able to collaborate with municipalities and other role players like SALGA to make sure that issues identified by the AGs are collaboratively attended to. So we are seated here today entertaining the outcome of that particular process. I must indicate that this report is quite encouraging in that it shows that there's been a considerable improvement in audit outcomes in the past 5 financial years. That is, if we are to look from the financial year 2010, 2011 to the current financial year that is being reviewed. And as correctly cited by the AG, in 2010-2011 financial year, only 16 municipalities and entities received unqualified audits with no findings. Quite interestingly and quite encouraging, this has increased to 72 municipalities. The number of municipalities in 2010-2011 financial year who received disclaimers and adverse auditors' opinions decreased from 102 to 43, which is very, very encouraging. Look, it's our take as COGTA that we are not yet there, but correctly so, we have to acknowledge we are not where we were before. And it's our undertaking that a lot needs to be done to take this particular commitment forward. Firstly, I must indicate that we plan on working more closely with the AG. In fact, we have started that process already to mitigate areas of potential mismanagement, especially irregular, fruitless, and wasteful, as well as unauthorized expenditure. Inter alia, this will include instituting a cooperative relationship with the AG, specifically in the troubled provinces and municipalities, those that you term AG, municipalities that are providing disappointing performance. As indicated in our engagement before, we will be zooming into those municipalities as our first port of entry, who have been receiving, consecutively so, disclaimer opinions in the past 3 financial years. And I must indicate that as an immediate stopgap measure, our best to basic team will identify low-hanging fruit interventions, which will of course reduce some of the financial mismanagement that has been identified by the AG. And of course, we will intensify our financial management support at identified problematic municipalities. Of course, working in conjunction with the AG as well as the National Treasury. Remember, we have in our budget allocation a provision for municipal financial management grant, which is meant to assist municipality to develop their financial management systems. And one area that is very, very interesting in the report as presented by the AG is improvement of our supply chain management systems. This is an area that is going to enjoy our focus going forward. But maybe even before I pause, allow me also to indicate that as COGTA, we think that revenue enhancement and revenue generation is a critical aspect and one of the weakest links in our financial management systems. Lack of solid economic base in municipalities has led most of our municipalities not being financially sustainable. So issues of economic development, local economic development, will enjoy elevation in our Back to Basic program. But also it's important that we also bring to the attention of the nation the fact that one of the biggest problems of revenue enhancement systems in municipalities is caused by non-payment of services. So it's equally important that we encourage our people, more especially ratepayers, to come to the party. We are all in this thing together. So we'll urge our ratepayers to seriously consider prioritizing the payment of services that are rendered by municipalities. Now, we think that going forward, there will be a need of us intensifying all the interventions that have been initiated so far to make sure that municipalities are financially viable. We know this is a critical aspect of the status of a local government institution in our country. The AG's report, as you are all aware, focuses on financial management issues and governance issues, while without dwelling much on issues of service delivery. But it's a critical report that is helping us to determine the state of a local government sector in our country. And we welcome this report, and I think it is going to complement our efforts, more especially intervention efforts, as we try to ensure that our municipalities in the country are financially viable, but also are sustainable institutions through which we can drive development of our people at a local level. I thank you very much.
Honorable Minister Van Rooyen, Honorable Deputy Minister Nel, my colleague in the National Assembly, Honorable Florik, AG, Deputy Chairperson of SALGA, members of the media. AG, we are encouraged by the upward improvement noted in these outcomes. I guess the reflection of the investment made by your office in ensuring good administration in local government sphere. We are further encouraged by the fact that in municipalities there have been improvement. There has been tangible actions taken by leadership, both political and administrative, a practice which we think needs to be emulated. We have noted the improvements as we have highlighted them. To mention just a few. The number of municipalities that received clean audits has increased from 13 to 54. And we think that is an improvement, even though there is room to do much better. 6 of the 8 metro councils, 21 district municipalities, and 116 local municipalities have improved their audit outcomes during this period. There's been a significant reduction in the adverse disclaim audit opinions. While there are improvements, we ought to be concerned that some of the municipalities are taking longer to graduate into clean audit space, and hence our effort needs to be directed towards that, as the Honorable Minister has already alluded to that. We will be in an effort to expedite the quest towards improved audit outcomes, as the National Council of Provinces in the other House of Parliament. We intend to request the Select Committee on Finance and COGTA to intensify oversight on issues raised by the report H. We will also be seeking continuous engagement with SALGA and your department, Honorable Minister, to ensure that all issues pertaining to this report are followed up, are attended to as per the requirement. We will further be undertaking various activities, initiatives to fast-track capacity building of all municipalities immediately after the elections. I think that is very important. We will support the establishment and functioning of MPEC after the local government elections. I think it's important. It's a function that is very important, Deputy Chairperson of SALGA. We are committed to that process of making sure that the training immediately after the elections, it's something that we are going to be part of from the first day till to the end, working with our colleague from the National Assembly. We commend and appreciate the role played by AG's office in ensuring good governance in the local sphere of government. I thank you.
Honourable Minister, Deputy Minister, my colleague, the House Chairperson in the NCOP, the Auditor General, Mr. Makwetu, the Deputy Chairperson of SALGA, and members of the media, good morning. AG, may I start by expressing our gratitude and congratulations to you and your office for consistently producing this critical audit insight for us and the general public. Through your office report, we have been able to cast our minds on the pertinent issues that require the attention of government and oversight committees in the National Assembly. Having listened to your 5-year overview of the audit outcomes, I get a sense that there are indeed significant areas of progress, but also areas of stagnation that require attention. However, what is encouraging in particular is that we have concluded this 5-year period of local government, and it seems as if we have progressed significantly from where we were 5 years ago. The progress has been noted by the previous speakers, but what is evident, ladies and gentlemen, is that where there has been active involvement of leadership in the function of municipalities, you see the improvement. Where there is active participation of other role players, such as SALGA, the provincial treasuries, provincial oversight committees, the audit outcomes tend to tilt towards the positive. What we would like to see from the National Assembly is that every year, when at local government, we go to our communities to solicit their opinions in terms of IDPs, specific attention must be paid also on where municipalities need to improve, so that our people are aware what is the exact state of local government in those municipalities. We are thus concerned by the stagnation that we see in 34% of the municipalities and also regression in certain municipalities. With regard to these outcomes in front of us, ladies and gentlemen, I want to express the concern of the National Assembly in the following areas. 92% of municipalities' financial health is concerning and it requires intervention. The increase in the amount of unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless expenditure is a source of concern, especially in those weaker municipalities where you see the presence of consultants. And we must ask AG and the Honourable Minister, what are consultants doing in these municipalities that are weak, but they still produce adverse audit outcomes? There are still incidents relating to irregular processes with regard to supply chain management, and that is where processes need to be strengthened. In an effort to expedite the quest towards improved audit outcomes, the National Assembly committees will focus on the implementation of the 5 pillars outlined in the Back to Basics policy of the Department of Cooperative Governments and Traditional Affairs, ensure that they are entrenched and intensified within this critical sphere of governance. We will also use these oversight mechanisms at our disposal to monitor how these pillars are indeed executed by all the municipalities. In the immediate future, this report will be referred to the relevant oversight committees in the National Assembly, and we expect them to dissect the areas that require specific intervention. Where you have adverse audit outcomes, it focuses the attention on those municipalities, and we must deploy our resources as well as our oversight capacities to assist in those areas. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate the role that the Office of the Auditor General is playing in supporting democracy as one of the critical Chapter 9 institutions by providing independent analysis of government performance, especially in the aspect of local government, which is the closest sphere to our people. And I thank you.
Thank you. Minister Van Rooyen, Deputy Minister Nel, AG, my colleagues from Parliament, on behalf of the South African Local Government Association, we welcome the release of the 2014-2015 MF&A audit outcomes. As already said, SALGA is extremely pleased that this positive message that comes from municipalities. The Auditor General has indicated that as we begin this term in 2011, only 14 auditees received a clean audit, and 5 years later, they have moved to 74. And that's a sign of commitment in the sector that work has been done to change how municipalities are perceived. And in that, we really appreciate the commitment made by the different local mayors and councils to see to it that we provide a better audit and money is properly spent in different municipalities. But again, I must indicate that we really appreciate the commitment made by the Auditor General's Office to partner with SALGA in particular to see to it that work is being done in particular to those municipalities that previously were in the red for a longer time. And SALGA has actually developed a program to see to it that we pay particular attention to those municipalities. Well, again, we also want to appreciate the municipality in the Free State, Thembekile district municipality that is among the first in the district in the province to move to a clean audit. It's a sign of commitment that has been put together to see to it that municipalities do their part. I must indicate, Minister, that equally we want to appreciate the COCTA department to provide support to different municipalities that we are able to deliver on that. The AG report is assuring that the nation, that more than 60% of what we call operating budget has been appropriately utilized in municipalities. So the issue here is that normally when these matters are made, people think money is not properly used, or they take one line and paint the whole municipalities as bad and not performing well. But I think the report that we want to indicate is that almost 347 billion has been utilized properly in municipalities. And the signs that you will be able to see, as the Auditor General was speaking, there is a major progress in how municipalities are using their resources and ensure that we deliver properly in all our municipalities. So this means that the majority of the municipalities are also accounting. Not very long, for some 5 years ago, municipalities were unable to give their financial statements. And today, almost all of them are able to provide the reports and be able to indicate that citizens must also take interest in how government is run in municipalities. So as SALGA, we believe that the Auditor General's report is a key indicator to the state of local government. And it provides information and it also presents insight on how government is run. So for us, it's an empowering AG that structures and leaders of different municipalities are on course to focus on issues that will result in reliable financial reports. So what we are effectively saying to our municipalities, let's take interest on what the AG has said and focus on the issues that are raised so that we are able to move and we achieve the dreams of what we call clean audit. And I suppose AG, as we end this term and beginning a new term, we will be able to ensure that municipalities change forever. No regression, and municipalities are moving forward to change the picture. In 2013, SALGA hosted an anti-corruption conference in the summit in Cape Town. And the emphasis was about, let's ensure that we focus on the abuse and ensure that municipalities change. All municipalities across our country signed the pledge that they're going to do something. And I must indicate that we're beginning to see the positive results of that conference. That corruption is getting exposed, people are getting arrested, and those who abuse the system, there's some response to that. So we really appreciate that work is beginning to show fruits, and SALGA must take the credit that that work has been done properly. Again, SALGA is pleased that Municipal Audit Support Program indicated that we initiated a program that focused to certain municipalities in the country, which were largely in the red, and those municipalities, there has been focus. I would refer to you that there's Nala municipality, Great Gay, Kaboparo, I think almost 9 municipalities that we gave particular attention to them. And it's worth noting that those municipalities, most of them have moved from the red zone, and some of them are beginning to get unqualified reports. So it's a sign that work has been done. I think the Auditor General in the full report, members of the media would pick that in most issues that were previously a problem, property, infrastructure, equipment, supply chain, there's been improvement in different municipalities. And that is pleasing that to see too that there's progress in what we do. So, what we want to say to South Africans, that as we take the opportunity of the report, it's important to say that for municipalities to function at most best, is that citizens must take interest in governance. I think the minister referred to going back to basics. Let's take interest, let's pay. Let's also encourage business to take interest to pay for their services. Different departments of government must also pay for services so that we are able to change and ensure that services are better in our country. As you know that the debt of municipalities is increasing annually. We're at a point where we're at 120 billion countrywide where people owe municipalities. And if we are able to say, let's push everybody to pay, in my sense, Chair, I think we should be able to change the landscaping of municipalities. I want to close by saying, Salga appreciate the work of the AG. That serves as the primary source for information for municipalities to get focused on what needs to be done. Again, we thank the oversight support we receive from the different committees of Parliament that we are able to do this work and have a special focus on municipalities that are in a problem. Minister, we also want to thank the department. In particular, when we deal with the going back to basic, there's a pillar that specifies financial management in municipalities. And the support that we've provided to municipalities is very good. I think the message that we should send to South Africa is that there's a positive story. The story is positive. South Africa municipalities are going to do better in the near future. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, now it's your time. We'll take your questions. A set of 4 questions. Introduce yourself and your media house. We'll start with Cape Town, with our colleagues in Cape Town.
Thanks, Marion.
Good afternoon, Marianne Merton, Daily Maverick. Auditor General, this year, like last year, and like your colleague predecessor before you, the theme that emerges, leadership, political leadership, and consequences for actions, those are still problematic in many, many municipalities. Is there not a level of frustration from your side, from the Auditor General's office, that several years of similar findings being made, this still hasn't been addressed? And what would be your recommendation, your plea to the politicians, particularly the new ones coming in after the August 3 local government elections? And to the Minister of Kochta, I have absolutely no idea what it means that back to basic will identify, quote, low-hanging fruit interventions. Would the Minister please be able to clarify? Thank you.
Craig?
Good morning, Craig Dodds from Independent Newspapers. There seems to be a bit of an anomaly in the sense that you have this overall improvement in the audit outcomes, and at the same time you have an increase in the amount of irregular, fruitless and wasteful, etc. type of spending. Does that suggest that while the municipalities are getting better at accounting for their expenditure, they're not necessarily getting better at spending it appropriately? Well, could you comment on that? Thanks.
Paul?
Good morning, Auditor General Paul Vecchiato from Bloomberg. 2 questions. One is what's the difference between a clean audit and a clean audit status? You seem to have a story there. And then secondly, you said you audited 272 of the 278 municipalities. So are your percentages related to the 272 municipalities or the total figure of 278? Thank you.
Back to you, Chair.
can go ahead.
Yes.
Pretoria.
Just to deal firstly with the issue that Marianne raised, thank you once more for those questions. The issue of leadership and consequence, and whether we are frustrated by this recurring feature in these outcomes, we think that the area of improving internal controls, financial management, and those related disciplines does take time for some institutions that are not responsive. And as evidenced here, it also can be done quickly when there is sufficient levels of responsiveness. So as an audit office, we do not really get frustrated by this, because we realize that the audit is largely about continuously putting the effort on those things that do not work in order to ultimately realize the good outcome. So we do not have the option to be frustrated. Otherwise, then there's no need for an audit after we got frustrated by these outcomes. I think they are frustrating at another level, in the sense that the money and the opportunity that would have been realized based on the stated objectives suddenly now takes longer before it gets realized. And I think to that extent, I think anybody in their reasonable mind will be frustrated by this, because it's monies that are appropriated against the achievement of certain objectives. But we do take note of the fact that even in other jurisdictions with our colleagues elsewhere in the world, they will always raise issues, many of them, about the responsiveness of those that are charged with oversight when it comes to these audit outcomes. And they also report on it every now and again, whether it is developing or developed countries. And I think it's a feature of this thing that sometimes it requires a little bit of the patience that is needed at times, even though we may need to use different measures to try and get to the answer, but certainly we do not get frustrated by it. As far as what the leadership upcoming must do, we think that as evidenced in our analysis of those that have improved now, many of these 5 years ago and even longer, of these municipalities that are now looking shiny, many of them were looking bad 5 years ago, regardless of province. Many of them were looking bad. I'm sure when Terence reported some years ago, and he was sitting in a forum like this and said, we only have 5% clean audits. That was 5 years ago. Everybody took notice, because suddenly the penny dropped and everybody understood that without taking ownership of these audit outcomes and responding to the counsel that comes from the office, you're probably going to end up with the same audit outcome anyway. So the only advice, I guess, that we can give is to say, demonstrate the commitment that leadership makes by implementing in action the things that they said they will do. And for us, that is the one advice we can give to that upcoming leadership, because it's no use having all the poetry about your intentions, and when it comes to testing what the outcome of that poetry, we are still at poetry level. That's the crux of it for us. And hence the matter of consequences, because the reality is that if the standard of performance has been assessed by an independent office to be at a level lower than it should be, if there is no real performance in the system, performance management in the system, the chances are that if there's nobody taking action to fix that situation, it will remain so. Because what is the incentive for somebody to perform at a higher level when they know there is going to be no consequence regardless of any performance they deliver? That's the crux of it. And I think we all rely on the skills of civil servants who are working either in local government or any other sphere of government to do that which they said they can do when they assumed the responsibility for this. And I think we will live with these outcomes for as long as no consequences are attached. Regarding the issue of the increase in irregular expenditure and also seeing the improvement in accounting, I'd like to say to the point that Craig raised, that one of the issues we need to glean out of this report is that if somebody gives you 1,000 rands to go spend, and that's your total budget for the year, and you've got nothing else to worry about except to spend that 1,000 rand. If in the course of spending it for the past 12 months, you make mistakes, some are genuine administrative oversights, some are mistakes that are motivated by whatever other reasons, the bottom line is that at the end of that 12 months, when the audit function comes, it will pick up those errors for as long as they are significant. And it will highlight these errors to the person responsible for managing the books in that institution. And it will say to that person, you made an error here, please fix. If the person is happy about recognizing the error that they made, they will fix it. So once they've fixed that error, then the auditors are happy. And then it becomes unqualified. But if towards committing that error, you also took shortcuts, among others, those shortcuts are the likes of, I'm not going to call for a tender for this particular service I need. I'm just going to go get it from whoever I know. There's no way you are going to change that circumstance after the event because it's already happened. That's where the issue of compliance comes in. So you will end up, because the auditors are vigilant, they will not let you report wrong numbers because you're going to mislead the public. Now, once you've corrected them, then you become unqualified, which means on the accounting disciplines, there's also a level of support that comes from the audit process, which can get you over the hill. But there's nothing the audit can do to reverse the fact that you did not procure goods and services in a transparent manner. Hence, you are starting to see even those that are achieving good audit outcomes still have some levels of irregular expenditure. It is possible for many of them that the level of irregular expenditure is not so significant as to cause you to achieve a negative audit opinion. It is highlighted as a major weakness in your internal control that is likely to trip you should you not correct those controls in time. That's the extent of the link between what the accounting outcome versus the compliance findings when it comes to the area of irregular expenditure. As far as the point Paul raises regarding the percentage, as we say, we analyzed 272 out of 278, which means there are 6. So the 6 that is also outstanding has got a 0.something% to it, which means the base is 278. If I'm clear on that one, Paul. So the base is 278 for the fact that the other 6 have also got a percentage attached to them. So which means that we are reporting on the 276 we've analyzed. We are also allocating a point to the ones that have not been submitted. Let me talk about the outstanding ones briefly. Those 6 that we have not reported on are the ones that we told them that if you don't give us all of the information by the 31st of January, we're going to leave you behind. So some of them had already submitted financial statements, but we said we are cutting off at the end of January for purposes of this analysis. So it's not that they have held back the information. They did submit the information, but there were challenges that we were not prepared to wait for in order for us to report timeously on these outcomes. And the issue about clean audit and clean audit status, there's no real difference. The one that's status is really about reflecting on the situation as it is now, whereas clean audit is a running term that describes the fact that there are 3 elements that we examine. One of them is accurate presentation of financial statements. The other one is reporting accurately on performance information. And the third component that makes up this clean audit is compliance with key legislation, which is where the real essence of these accounts is. As I said, getting an unqualified opinion, like all accountants know, even if they themselves as accountants who are trained and qualified as accountants make mistakes, the audit always helps them, whether you are a chief financial officer of Anglo-American or TPS. And that's why when you see accounts of the likes of these big entities, some of them, they produce unqualified accounts, but they never report the fact that there were corrections they had to make during the course of the year, even though their controls would have been assessed as good. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for questions posed from Cape Town. It's important to note that we are approaching this particular report as part of the work that is continuing. We are not approaching it as an isolated activity from the broader work that we have been engaged in. I think that is very, very important. So as we don't create an impression that just because of this report we will start doing something. We have been working very hard to make sure that there are some achievements in our local government sector. And as part of our work, allow me to indicate as I respond to the question on the consequence management, because I think it's very, very important. We are preoccupied with ensuring that there are repercussions for identified wrongdoings. We can't allow a situation whereby, as part of our consequence management system, identified weaknesses, people don't pay the price for such. People must obviously take responsibility, for their actions. And I'm happy to indicate that, which of course is a bit unfortunate because this is something that we can't tolerate in our system, and we expect our people, of course, not to fall into this particular area. As part of our back to basic pillar on good governance, currently I can report that there are not less than 2,665 disciplinary matters that are being attended to. And I must indicate these cases include dismissal cases that we have captured, and of course some of the staff who resigned prior to the finalization of the disciplinary proceedings. And I must indicate also to ensure that people don't escape our consequence management system. We have created a database which also serves as a central repository of information pertaining to disciplinary proceedings. And this database enables us, to blacklist staff members who have been dismissed for misconduct. Now, this serves as a guidance to municipalities when maybe they want to conduct some appointment about who are these individuals. So it's a very, very helpful tool, and it's really ensuring that there are repercussions for wrongdoings. And secondly, low-hanging fruits. There are so many that we can think of as part of the work that we are doing now. Coming to mind very quickly is assistance to municipalities to develop audit findings action plans. Because remember, as findings are made, it's important that there are clear plans on how those findings are going to be addressed. And identifying that there is a gap in terms of capacity to develop such response plans, this is one thing that we do have a capacity to intervene quickly, working together with the AG's office, of course, and SALGA to assist some of these municipalities. But also, remember, there are forensic investigations that have been instituted as a result of the findings that has been made in the past. Some of the low-hanging fruits imply ensuring that there are action taken, in dealing with these forensic findings. We are obviously, beyond the 3rd of August this year, we will be focusing on the constitution of new municipal councils. And key among these institutions, it will be the development of municipal public accounts committees. We need to develop their capacity. So these are low-hanging fruits that we think we can definitely move in and ensure that we are able to attend to. And the list is endless. So what we are indicating that is that we are ready to obviously intervene in those areas to assist municipalities. Thank you very much.
Thanks. We'll take another set of senior Nick, Karen, ma'am.
I'm Karen Warren from ENCA. My question is both to the AG and Minister Van Rooyen. While you've shown a marked increase in the kind of monitoring of the financial situation of municipalities, you also refer to the fact that 92% of South African municipalities have concerning finances. And a quarter of all South African municipalities, you don't actually know if they're going to be able to even continue to operate because of their poor finances. To the Minister, I mean, as someone who experienced the kind of rage of service delivery protests in Kutsong, your own house was burned to the ground. You are well aware of the political dynamics within our municipalities, particularly around service delivery. I mean, how do you address an issue of finance that could have real impact on your ability, your municipality's ability to provide services? And to simply say that you would urge ratepayers to pay for municipal service, is that actually enough given the context of what's happening here? And then also for the AG in that same situation, I mean, do you have any advice to government about what potentially in the context of a nation that is, you know, on fire in many respects, could turn out to be a powder keg? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nicholas Barr from ENCA. First of all, congratulations on increasing the amount of municipalities and municipal entities that have received a clean audit. But how should we interpret these other facts, some that my colleague has just mentioned? Fruitless and wasteful expenditure increasing by over R1 billion in the past 5 years. Irregular expenditure more than doubled. It's now sitting at over 15 billion. Unauthorized expenditures increased threefold. Is this a case of many municipalities improving their finances, but those who haven't improved have regressed to such an extent that it spoils the whole picture that we're looking at? As I understand that you've painted a very positive picture here, but looking at those numbers, do they not alarm you? I mean, at the end of the day, how much of an improvement has there actually been if we see these figures with fruitless and wasteful expenditure, irregular expenditure, and the fact that over a quarter of the municipalities, you're not even sure if they can continue as a financial entity? Thank you.
Nobutla Nkoma from ANN7. My question is to the Ministry of the COGTA Ministry. Pardon me. We've heard you speak out before about the continued reliance on consultants, and we've seen here that 68% of those municipalities that do use the services of consultants, they've identified weaknesses. What are some of the suggestions that you've tabled out to deal with this reliance on consultants? What are some of the suggestions that you've tabled in order to see less reliance on these consultants? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Aldrin Simpier from SABC TV News. I have a couple of questions, so I'm just going to shoot all of them. The first one is with regards to the provinces. Can you indicate whether there is any province that has none of its municipalities receiving clean audits? You did indicate that the Free State is out of the dark with Thabo Mofutanyane. And what's the debt levels at currently when it comes to these municipalities? When you say that a quarter of these municipalities might not be able to operate further, and in the statement that was issued earlier on, it indicates that instability in key positions at municipalities like the municipal manager and chief financial officer and so forth, it's a cause of concern when it comes to the financial performances of these municipalities. Is the amalgamation of municipalities, does that at all affect the financial status of the outcomes of such audits that you do? And finally, in terms of the supply chain management, you indicate that there was about 14.7 billion rand in irregular expenditure. Only 10 10 billion can be accounted for, that means that about 4 billion is unaccounted for. Is there any criminal action, recommendations for criminal action?
Thank you. Sidi Madia from Power FM. Just one very quick question. You mentioned areas like the West Rand consistently being an issue. I suppose this question is for both the AG and the Minister of COGTA. For the Minister, what do you do about areas like the West Rand? I mean, government's done a lot to try and fix the West Rand, but it remains an issue. And then also for the AG, what is the suggestion around this particular issue, around municipalities where they've changed leadership, they've tried all sorts of intervention, and yet they remain as areas that are desperate rather, in need of strengthening? Thank you.
I hope we're not doing, you're not overshadowing the AG. This is the AG's platform. But thank you very much. Once more, let me post. Let me just indicate that I think that we shouldn't create an impression that there's no acknowledgement on some of the teething challenges that are facing municipalities around issues of financial management and governance system. We acknowledge, and that is very, very apparent in the report, and also in my response to the report, I indicated that we are concerned about those areas, and what we'll be doing, or what we will intensify doing, because we have been doing a lot of work to assist some of the municipalities. Through our back to basic system, I think so far it's well publicized program. We have identified pillars that is going to guide our intervention. But at the center of that, something that must be appreciated is the fact that our approach is a collaborative approach. We will be working with all role players to make sure that we attend to some of these specific issues. On issues of financial management, as an example, I mean, the intervention, the collaborative intervention working with National Treasury by introducing a financial management grant is a commitment on the government side to make sure that we assist municipalities to develop capacity on issues of financial management. The list is endless on some of these interventions that we are coming up with. And I think we are the first one to acknowledge that addressing challenges facing municipalities is not an easy task. And some of the problems, of course, are very perennial, that we are not hearing about this problem for the first time. But as earlier requested, it's crucial that we acknowledge that there is a steady progress that we are making. And once more, we are not where we want to be. But truly speaking, akufani is all. I mean, it's not like yesterday. Please, let's accept that. The issue of singling out ratepayers as the only role players is a bit unfortunate and very selective, because those who are following my response, I've made it very clear that inter alia, among other things, we will be looking at how to elevate issues of economic development in local space, because without a strong economic base, I mean, that's a given. We will continue to have challenges of revenue generation by individual municipalities. And equally important for us to emphasize is the need for ratepayers and citizens to play their part as patriots and pay services that are rendered by municipalities, because these services are not for free. Municipalities pay, I mean, to get these services provided. So it's very interesting to find out that this question is being posed so selectively. Well, as I've indicated, let's understand the AG's approach to issues of local government. The focus of the AG is not detailed on the status of service delivery. It's very, very detailed on aspects of financial management and governance. So if we want us to unpack service delivery, really we'll have to look at other mechanisms of doing that. And I think for now, we fully acknowledge that there are service deliveries in various municipalities, but the reality of the matter is that there's also improvement on how some of these municipalities are conducting their business. Just for example, without necessarily taking much of your time, let's look at how rating agencies just recently has articulated on performance of some of the municipalities. Is it not something that maybe should be coming out of you to say how do they get it right, how other municipalities can learn from those municipalities, more especially our metros? It's a clear indication that our local government system in South Africa is working. It's working, and it's quite encouraging to realize that rating agencies value our municipalities so high. Because you know that what is the impact of that? It then implies issues of liquidity for those municipalities can be improved, but also municipalities all of a sudden are viewed as a destination for investment. So really, these are some of the things that we really need to take note of. But maybe even before, well, there's an interesting issue on reliance on consultants. We are acknowledging here, look, it's just 15 years in this system. After years, many years, centuries and decades of a system that was not meant to service the majority of the people of our country. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we have all acknowledged that we are faced with, institutional capacity. That's why we have included this in our Back to Basic program. There is a problem of developing the necessary capacity in some of our municipalities, more especially the so-called scarce skills, around the scarce skills. But there is a focused approach on this particular matter. And then we hope that with time, some of these interventions will yield. You know, maybe before I hand over to the AG, I must commend the gentleman who started by commending the good work. For the first time, since we have been here, I heard such a comment. I think it's applaudable. And And then all the questions posed were so negative. They were all on the negative side. They are not focusing on the positive. Look, really, I don't understand how we approach some of these things as South Africans. We need a person like an American comedian, Kevin Hunt, to come and tell us on how unpatriotic is our media. And I think that is highly evident in how you pose your questions. You start with the negative, and I don't know if you ever have time to think of the positive as a way of maybe showing your patriotic position on some of these matters. I thank you very much for acknowledging the good performance that is not visible to some of your colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Just to deal with the one question that came from Nick. I don't know if all of us have got a copy of this general report, because I'm just going to refer to some pages in it. But if you look at the total amount of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, and if I ask you to perhaps go to page 121. If I start on page 121 and I say look at the column to the right, the furthest to the right column. That column, if you look at item number 212 on that page, which is Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. If I quickly take you through what's going on in that page under Nelson Mandela, you will discover that out of the 272 municipalities that we are commenting on, Nelson Mandela Bay Metro alone, out of the 272 municipalities, when it comes to fruitless and wasteful expenditure, accounts for 422 million of it. One municipality out of the 272 accounts for 42% of the total of 1 billion of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. And if you run your eye on that line, you'll probably get to page, on the same line, I think it's on page 123. You look at the second highest level of fruitless and wasteful expenditure will be under item 301, which is Machabeng that we cited in our analysis in the Free State. That is the second highest. Of a total of 1 billion for 272 people, 2 of them are already accounting for almost more than half of that. Now that explains that conundrum. How come you have these good outcomes when you have this massive level of wasteful and fruitless expenditure? I'm suggesting that the number is big in that it's 1 billion, but the rest of other guys have got 9,000 rands there, 12,000 rands there, 20,000 rands there of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, which is an acceptable figure in the context of the conclusion that we've reached in the audit. Because you will see, for example, under the same numbers that I quoted, Nelson Mandela with that is a qualified audit, because in anybody's book, that is quite a significant amount of fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Let me just explain again what that particular one for Nelson Mandela is. I'm sure you will know from having read through the media that they bought these many buses that were going to be part of the bus transit system and so on and so forth. So for as long as they have not yet taken them out of the storage to put them to use, any other expenditure that they incur subsequent to having bought those buses and not used them, any expenditure to pay people that they had employed in anticipation of getting them to drive those buses, technically speaking, that gets classified as fruitless and wasteful expenditure, because you are still incurring expenditure, but the asset against which that expenditure is being incurred is not in use. And the reason that it is not in use is obviously the point that you can examine further directly with them as to why those buses are there but not being used. So those are some of the nuances that sit in this report to be able to understand at the level of detail why you have growing levels of fruitless and wasteful expenditure when the outcomes are showing an improvement. It is possible because it could be concentrated in a limited number of this population of municipalities when the rest do have elements of it, but not so significant as to attract a negative audit outcome. Coming to the point that Karen Mon raises regarding the monitoring controls, the going concern risk, and so on and so forth. I think what we are highlighting here is that when you've got the going concern risk and the risk of continuity of these municipalities staring you in the face, and you know that it is unlikely to get additional cash from the center, from the fiscus, to pay for certain things that you need to pay as a municipality. But you know that almost 78% of the people in your municipality do not work, so the chances are that they may not be able to pay for whatever services you are delivering. What we are highlighting here is that if you've got that situation and your monitoring controls are weak, you've got a double problem, because you're going to have massive levels of expenditure being incurred, and if they are not being controlled, you're going to have two negatives on the financial side. Huge expenditures, no control, but huge levels of revenue not generated because of the going concern risk. So we're saying that the risk remains of a going concern in the sense that your ability to continue to generate cash resources is becoming limited. But it also gets compounded by the fact that the people in your administrative functions, including finance, if they are not doing their work with the requisite level of technical capacity required, they are going to miss certain obvious things and end up with huge amounts of expenditure and huge amounts of outstanding debt, which compromises your ability to pay for services in the future. Regarding the West Rand municipality, I just want to flag the issue that in the West Rand region, we've also put the focus on the two troublesome areas there, and we've highlighted the municipality of Western Area and Randfontein. And I think the deputy chair of SALGA will be able to share some more detail. But for us, those are the two major areas that require this attention. And I'm sure Mponala will help us with further detail on this. Let me just fix the issue that came regarding the supply chain of 14.7 as well as the 10. What I'm saying here is that when you identify irregular expenditure, In terms of the MFMA, you are required to report on it as quantified based on the contracts. So what we are saying is that we've identified through our audits contracts that add up to 14.7 billion of irregular expenditure, which is what we are reporting. Now, what normally happens when we report on this irregular expenditure, all manner of analysis happens. Among those analyses are things like, these 14.7, would the suggestions be, we could have spent it on X number of schools, houses, hospitals, all sorts of things that potentially could be bought with 14.7 billion. By highlighting the 10 that I'm referring to, I'm not saying that the 10 is what was recovered and therefore the 4.7 is what some disciplinary action must be taken against. I'm saying we even took it a step further to say, of that 14.7 billion, 10 of it, we've satisfied ourselves that the stuff that was being bought, because remember the irregular expenditure triggers this idea that there was corruption, so you gave somebody money but got nothing. That's what I'm trying to clear with this 10 billion, because I could sense the question is assuming that we've given clearance to 10, but there's 4.7 outstanding. 10 is just the sample of the total 14.7 that we were able to test. Otherwise, if we wanted to test the full 14.7, we could have done it. But for purposes of the audit, we decided of this 14.7, let us be satisfied that even if it is regular, but let's be satisfied that we did get something for it. For example, if you are an accounting officer in a department and you've got R1 million to spend, if you didn't go through supply chain, the 1 million becomes irregular. But if, as an accountant, you are going to satisfy yourself, did that firm that was going to give you the accounting service come to give it? And if we see that there are reports that are issued by that firm, and there are payments being made to it. If we are able to satisfy ourselves to the extent of 800,000 of that 1 million rands, that's what the 10.4 versus 10 is. So the point is not about what happens to those that represents the 4.7. The point is we are satisfied that this 14.7 in total is not all at risk if there was someone who was taking chances and paying without getting anything for the payment. That's the context of that 14.7 versus 10. And then the effect of amalgamation on outcomes. I'll speak about the historical part, and I'm sure someone else will deal with where we headed with this forward. We observed when we looked at the accounts for 2010, 2011, when we were doing the audit in the first year of the last 5 years of Tshwane municipality. If you remember, Tshwane got to amalgamate with a number of other municipalities that were around it at the time. And it was clear that when they had to integrate and amalgamate their finances, they started facing a situation that was a little more bleaker than it was before that amalgamation. And the large part for it for Tshwane was the fact that they had to incorporate the debt of those municipalities that amalgamated with it. And those municipalities that amalgamated with it didn't have a strong base to finance the debt that they had at the date of amalgamation. Hence, the financial fortunes of Tshwane when it comes to debt recovery deteriorated in that context. So it is just one example of what we've already seen with the previous amalgamation. I have no idea what the impact of that will be going forward. Maybe the minister can assist us with that one. As far as the instability is concerned, we are highlighting the issue of instability because when there are consistent vacancies in the areas of financial management and supply chain, functions that are meant to be controlled at that level end up not being controlled. The likes of supply chain transactions get approved without the necessary checks. The reconciliations of account balances and financial records never get done or supervised. And the reason for it is because this instability, which is about certain posts that are supposed to perform certain functions which are vacant, remain vacant and nobody performs the control. Hence, the issue of instability becomes our major reality. And I'll let Deputy Chair of SALGA to deal with that West Rand one, and perhaps if the Minister wants to add more to the issue of amalgamation. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, AG. I thought it might be important to indicate that the two municipalities that you referred to, Randfontein and Western Air, are both in transition. But I think the cause of the collapse largely is the instability of the municipalities. So one, political instability in Randfontein, which has been corrected, I suppose. The Western Air, the problem has been that they have never had a CFO for a longer period. What has been happening, the AG and the district municipality have set up a team to focus on the two municipalities with the support of the provincial government. Major issues there is about asset register and issues that I think are able to be dealt with, but and the whole issue about the fruitless expenditure. There's issues that we think there's progress, and if we've known that these issues will be raised, we would have brought the report of what is the progress. I do hope that in the next audit reports, the two municipalities will move away from the disclaimer or adverse to unqualified report, because there's much progress. So there's some focus on the two municipalities. I think the point that we really want to make is that if you see that, I think the point that the AG is making about how to manage poor two municipalities and what are the impacts financially, we are certain that with the support of COGTA and the provincial government, as they emerge, you will not have the same experience of what Tshwane have went through. And these two municipalities will be able to come out of the zone. If you are to ask me, that I think issues that are holding the two municipalities back are minor. If you can get the political stability right and deal with the appointment of the critical officials, i.e. the CFO in Western Area, because they are going to merge, you need to have one of them. The two municipalities will move away from the red zone to a green zone.
Okay. Let me quickly deal with the amalgamation issues. As you are all aware, guiding the amalgamation processes, or why in the first place there was a determination for amalgamation. Firstly, the issue of sustainability of municipalities was considered, but also quite critical, the issue of financial viability was also considered. So I'm saying this because it is important to know that at the center of this decision, one of the tenant principles is financial viability. So there's no intention to amalgamate, to perpetuate financial or maybe financial status that is not sustainable. Now, it's true, there are lessons that have been drawn from the amalgamation of Tshwane. And as you are all aware, beyond the 3rd of August, there are municipalities that will be amalgamated, guided by the cited principles. Now, those lessons will be taken into consideration because there are 7 areas that we are looking at to make sure that transitional aspects are entertained. The first, of course, is issues of finances of the municipality that are brought together, HR-related issues, but also issues of a governance system. And I can tell that one of the key lessons that has been learned from Tshwane is how do we align the tariff system of the municipalities that you are bringing together. And I'm dead sure that beyond the 3rd of August, we'll have a robust engagement with affected municipalities on this particular area. Well, as we are speaking now, municipalities, through the transitional committees that have been established, they are currently entertaining all, transitional related issues like naming of the new municipalities, as well as agreeing on the administration of offices that can be used by that municipalities. So the result of the matter is that there are lessons that have been learned in Tshwane, and also very, very key, AG, is the fact that how do we provide for this gap, because usually there is a gap in terms of finances, but also there is a gap in terms of the debt level, of the municipalities that we are bringing together. How do we provide for such will be a very, very critical aspect to grapple with as we make sure that these amalgamated municipalities turn into institutions of service delivery that will ensure that services, basic services, continue to be rendered to our people without any hindrance. So I think we are definitely taking the lessons of Tshwane into account as to we deal with the amalgamations of the new municipalities. Thank you very much.
We'll take the last set of questions, starting with Cape Town.
Over to you, Paul.
Good afternoon, Minister. Good day, Minister. Paul Vecchiato from Bloomberg again. The financial management of any entity like municipality is an expression of the political control. There's been a lot of talk that there's violence among councillors in order to get control of tenders. Most of government expenditure or service delivery is done through municipalities. Has your ministry come across or received reports of violence against councillors, whether incumbent or candidates? And could you tell us how many have been killed or attacked over the past few months? Have you got any indication of that? Thank you.
Back to you, Chair.
Questions from this side? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Lamise Umarji from Finweek. In terms of your unauthorized expenditure related to overspending of the budget, I wanted to know if it is purely just because of debt impairments, and what would be a long-term solution then for municipalities to ensure that they collect revenue?
The last two questions.
I'm sorry if this has been addressed already, but I wanted to ask the Auditor General if he has noticed any shifting of the budget towards security for councillors with all these service delivery protests happening.
The last one, CD.
Maybe you should start with me. Okay, we just still busy. Okay, mine are just two questions. Once more, thank you very much for the questions. I have indicated that as part of our consequence management systems, not less than 2,665 cases has been processed. And it is very clear that it cuts across. There are cases as a result of forensic investigations that have been conducted in municipalities. Of course, as guided by the findings of the AG mainly, that shown that officials are involved, but in some cases public representatives are also involved. Unfortunately, I don't have those details here in terms of how do we categorize the cited cases, but I think that information can be availed. But what I want to emphasize here is that no one is above the law. All that is being done, if there are people that are wrongfully participating in some of these activities, action has been taken and I will continue to act. But I must also indicate that our procurement legislation or supply chain legislation are very, very clear as to who should be involved in those processes. So as guided by the said legislation, and something that should be uploaded, because our systems of legislation is very, very tight on who should participate in some of these decision-making processes. And truly speaking, we don't expect public representatives, to be part of those processes. Our legislation is very, very clear. And as guided by our legislation, that's why we are able, of course, to make the necessary apprehensions, but also, where possible, to take necessary steps. And I think, of course, working together with all, we will continue, to deal with this particular problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As far as the matter of unauthorized expenditure and what ought to be done to slow down the growth of this area of expenditure, I think if we start from the premise that expenditure, when it gets appropriated, it becomes authorized to be spent. That's the starting point, because the whole process of appropriating money is to respond to a request for that money, which, if that request is granted via a budget, then it becomes authorized. To prevent it from ever becoming unauthorized, we think, is to insist on introducing the things that we spoke about on page 2 of our media release, which is about the enhancing of the monitoring activities, which must include quarterly reports in the in-year monitoring process. Because if you do not catch some of these transactions in the quarter when they happen, the chances are that by the time an audit happens, it's already an accumulation of 12 months of things that could have been prevented. Because if I am a councillor responsible for 12 million of the budget for the delivery of infrastructure, and I get, as a discipline in the municipality, quarterly reports, by the end of the third quarter, I should have an idea, when I know what is still to be done, as well as what has already been spent of that 12 million. Unfortunately, that discipline, we do not have it in quite a number of municipalities, either because they are not required to produce financial information regularly, and they only try and do it at the end of the year. Hence the wild chase after consultants who now must come and fix these financial statements, because we absolutely have no idea what happened in the month of May, June, and July, which was probably the first couple of months of the year. I think these are the basic disciplines, among others, that we are talking about. It's not even a case of introducing a new policy. It's a question of people being taken to task to do the work that they said they will do. Because quite frankly, if I control 12 million rands and I know nobody is watching over what happens to it, all manner of things can happen to that 12 million rands. Because people have got different ideas when that money has landed in the bank account. That question about whether any political activities have been funded, I'm not too sure how to answer it. If I perhaps don't use an analogy that says that if this was an entertainment entity, what would have been the status of entertainment expenditure in respect to an entertainment entity? And I'm moving from the premise that there will be some element of funding political activity. Again, it's whether that political activity has been appropriated in the initial request, because by its very nature, local government institutions are also political institutions. So they do have an element of expenditure towards that, but the focus of the audit is not to quantify the difference between that which was supposed to be for services purely, as well as for that which was about maintaining and growing the institution of local government, if that's what that expenditure is meant to achieve. So included in all of these accounts and in all of this analysis, where I'm heading to, is that the expenditures that we have examined are all expenditures, regardless. Some of them are operational expenditures, some of them are capital expenditures. And capital expenditures are those that are spent towards bringing assets that will be used for future delivery of services. The likes of your sanitation plants, In our general report in the previous year, we showed some pictures of the type of assets that were bought with some of these monies in different municipalities, which were asset acquisitions. And asset acquisitions are not just for this year. They are paid for this year in order to continue to deliver the required services even in subsequent years. So we have not quantified, coming back to the specific question, we have not quantified any specific expenditures with regards to its nature, category, and so on. But we appreciate the fact that within local government, one must expect an element of expenditure that is political in nature. We also have not detected any shifting of costs towards security of councillors, and also being cognizant of the fact that the analysis that you are giving is in respect of the year that ended in June 2015. So anything that might be happening in the current period or in the last 9 months or so will possibly be reported on when we report on the 2016 financial year. Overall, as a conclusion, on our side, we think that we have laid out some of the fundamental qualitative elements that go with financial management and financial reporting. And we believe that contained in these elements, which are largely to do with deficiencies in administration and control, many of them that have to do with the deteriorating financial condition of most municipalities, there is something that needs to be done urgently to ensure that we do not allow this situation to escalate. Because when all these controls and their related weaknesses become real, there will be nowhere to go to find that which is needed to continue to deliver the daily services. Yesterday, there was a report which was issued by the Finance and Fiscal Commission. And we think that when we issue this general report on local government as the audit office, we are not trying to answer all possible problems that could attach to a particular municipality. We are honing in on an area that we believe is significant enough for it to be given attention, because ultimately monies must be spent to have people working in the institutions doing the things that matter for the communities. Our focus is largely to say, how did we evaluate the manner in which the disciplines associated with financial management were carried out? How did we evaluate the disciplines associated with protecting these monies so that nobody abuses them? That's what our report carries. If you look at the Stats SA report, you will find all manner of other quantitative information that gives you a sense of how life is being experienced in different parts of the country. But the Finance and Fiscal Commission will also give you an insight on local government as to how the distribution and allocation of financial resources is predominantly preferred to be managed. So, in essence, for us, we are just part of this overall governance mechanism when it comes to putting the spotlight on finances, and I think that other sources which have got equal responsibility but looking at different things ought to be looked at as well, so that we all of us can have a simple picture. For example, in one of the reports of the FFC, I read that they are looking at examining the effectiveness of district municipalities. In our report, we are just reporting on the outcomes of those districts without making any suggestion as to what ought to be done with them. If anyone wants to examine that at a deeper level, the Finance and Fiscal Commission report will probably be the right point of reference. And thank you very much to all the media in attendance today. And we are hoping that as we go forward in the next few days, we will also make ourselves briefly to provide additional clarity on the stuff that you are responsible for, so that we can allow the professionals in local government to carry on with what they are wanting to do in the next 2 months. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairperson. Paul feels that his question was not answered.
Hi, Minister Paul from Bloomberg. Thank you for your answer. That was quite useful. Just on violence against councillors, are you monitoring the situation and have you received any reports about that? Thank you.
Back to you, Chair.
Can you repeat your question, Paul?
Okay. Sorry, I said the Minister's answer to my question was very useful. It's just on violence against councillors. Is his ministry monitoring this, and have they received reports about this? And if so, how many councillors have been attacked or murdered or so on in the run-up? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, we are engaging with the relevant MECs, and I must indicate that, yeah, we are updated as to what is happening on the ground, and I think that suffices to indicate that this is part of our work as local government. But of course, as you know, in the spirit of intergovernmental relationships, we work with MECs on those details. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, colleagues. Thanks again for your time. The AG will be available for interviews. Before you go and file your stories, please join us for light refreshments outside. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Minister.
Hey, our struggle goes on.
Thank you.
Minister.
Chair, when we spoke, I had a feeling that Parliament is around. Oversight is being conducted.